In this section of the presentation, we focus on investment properties. My goal is to share trends and hard data in order to help investors and their bankers make informed decisions in 2021. In Sioux Falls in 2020, we got off to a really strong start, and then we had some massive disruption, of course, in the form of COVID. In Sioux Falls, investors hit the pause button for about 1 or 2 months, and then proceeded to buy more property than we've ever seen before in Sioux Falls. Ended up being an amazing year. We love real estate here at Bender Commercial. We specialize in real estate, but we realize that our clients have a lot of asset classes when it comes to allocating capital. Our clients invest in cryptocurrency, stocks, vacation homes, commodities, and even livestock. Let's take a look at how some of these asset classes performed in 2020. Well, it should be no surprise that almost all of these asset classes had a tremendous performance, even though we had historic disruptions. The number one trend in Sioux Falls in 2020 in the investment real estate market was that we as a market really outperformed the U.S. market. Underlying this major theme, multifamily transactions and development were very, very strong. They were records. We also saw some cap rate compression, particularly in multifamily. We'll explain that's mostly due to newer and newer assets being traded, but all asset classes showed tremendous strength. Let's take a quick look at that U.S. market that I just referenced. This graph shows a year, this is 12 months of 2020 in terms of sale volume. The goal that I want to show you is that the year got off to a tremendous start, nosedive, and has really only moderately recovered. Another U.S. National Snapshot. This graph shows sales volume measured in year-over-year percentage, really broken down per quarter, all the way back to 2007. The takeaway to this slide is that the U.S. market hasn't had a worse performance since 2008 and 2009. One last national slide, and this shows cap rates. This shows cap rates for all asset classes going back to 2000. And the takeaway on this slide is that cap rates are compressing. That's the trend, and rebounded only slightly in 2020. However, I think it's worth pointing out to here, because you're going to hear the word cap rates a couple more times through this presentation. What is a cap rate? A cap rate is a measurement or a snapshot of yield or return. This is computed using the net operating income divided by the purchase price on an asset. Switching gears to Sioux Falls. I mentioned a couple times that Sioux Falls had a record year. Well, let's take a look at that record year. This is a monthly breakdown of total transactions across all asset classes, starting in January and, of course, ending in December. We hit pause for a slight moment in March and April, but we really didn't skip a beat. In fact, we accelerated. This is the same graph of Sioux Falls, January through December, showing sales volume in dollars. This is an incredible graph. January, February were very strong months, but look at October and December. These were record-breaking months. Next, we're going to take a look here at Sioux Falls MultiFamily Construction. And this graph shows new permits pulled going all the way back to 2010. In 2020, we pulled the second highest number of new multifamily unit construction since any time other than 2016. Why did developers do this? Number one, vacancy was low, and we're going to take a look at that in a moment. But also, this was perceived to be a safe asset class to develop because Sioux Falls population continues to grow. Let's take a look at the Sioux Falls multifamily sales volume slide. This is an incredible slide. Let's break it down here. The bar shows sales volume in dollars going all the way back to 2007. The number at the top of the bar is number of transactions 4 units and higher. So this is 4 plexes and higher. Also, in the last 3 years, there is a note on the last 3 sales bars, and that shows the average price per unit in the transaction, $50,000 a unit in 2018, going all the way up to almost $100,000 a unit. Let's break this down. This isn't because properties are selling at such greater numbers. The price per unit isn't going up just because of prices being driven higher. This is a result of newer and newer assets being sold. But the big takeaway here is $130 million worth of transactions. That's incredible. And last, let's end this multifamily fundamentals per se with a vacancy slide. The vacancy in Sioux Falls of 6.39% is the lowest vacancy that we've had since 2016. Why are we having such low vacancy right now? Well, population growth and developer supply, let's call it discipline, over the last 4 years. This is a tremendously healthy vacancy rate. Next, we're going to zip through some comparable sales. These are sales that took place in 2020, and we're going to take a look at particularly cap rates. And we're going to do this across a couple of different asset classes, but the star of this year's presentation was multifamily. Let's drill down. The Maples is a northern Sioux Falls apartment building that sold for 6.75% cap rate. Remember, we talked about the definition of the cap rate, or $6 million. The Cox portfolio, this is a great development, about 40 years old, located near Tomar Park, south side of town, 6.4 cap, or roughly $6 million. West Briar Common, now we're going to take a look at some of these newer units that have traded, okay? This is a 10-year-old project, 152 units, 5.35% cap rate. Woodlake Commons, this is an older one. We're going to get to some newer ones. Woodlake Commons is right on the corner of 49th and Louise, and this sold for just under $8 million at a 7.26% cap rate. Greystone Townhomes, $10 million transaction. This is only 3 years old. This was a 6.08% cap rate. Diamondfield Commons, another new development, just right around 5 years old, 6.19% cap rate, $23.5 million deal. Prairie Edge Townhomes, also a newer project, 8 years old, 5.46% cap rate. Silver Springs, 5-6-year-old project, 5.65% cap rate, just under $1 million, $8 million. Sanford Health, this is an office transaction, and it was a really big one. This is on East Benson Road, $30 million transaction. Sanford is a tenant in this property, and the ownership was a Chicago group that sold, and this sold at a 6.25% cap rate. Rock Island Building, beautiful downtown building with some history, $3.6 million, or a 6.36% cap rate. Cherry Creek office. This is East 26th Street, $1 million transaction, a 6.87% cap rate. Garden Village office. This was on Lindcrest. This is south side of town, 6.47% cap rate, roughly $1 million transaction. Verizon store. This is just east of Western Avenue, $3 million transaction, 6 cap. Lippert Components, Laverne Trucking property. This is in Brandon. This is an industrial property, $6.3 million transaction at a 7.8% cap rate. Let's kind of pull some of this together here. This is the report card for the year. Multifamily, office, and retail all had record years in terms of transactions. The cap rates for multifamily really were between 5.5% to 7.5%. Office, 6.5% to 7.5%, and retail, we saw that between 6% and 7.75% cap rate. Conclusions, Sioux Falls had a massive year in 2020. Multifamily was clearly the star, but office and retail was really strong too. As we're roughly a month and a half into the new year, I can tell you investor appetite for multifamily and really all asset classes remains elevated. And there's a lot of capital chasing a small number of transactions. Predictions, Investors are talking to us about doing some strategic planning for their portfolio. One of the things that they heard during the presidential campaign process was perhaps an adjustment to the tax rates on capital gains. This is something that they're watching very carefully. You may see some big strategic moves this year due to tax reasons. And of course, the prediction here is I think we're going to have another record year in 2021 simply due to the fact that there's the promise and the hope of a recovery that will be driven through vaccines and public health improvements and cities opening back up. That's all going to be a flywheel that will really help Sioux Falls have even a better year. And of course, it's worth mentioning cap rates, they're not going to change a whole lot. They're going to remain steady and interest rates will remain low. We're going to end this presentation with the multifamily real estate cycle. And due to the fact that we're seeing so much new development, low cap rates, and population increases, I put 2020 firmly into the first stage of expansion. Thank you so much for listening to the Bender Commercial Investment Report. Looking forward to sharing this information with you on a one-on-one basis in the future.